Now it's time for our first roundtable discussion, the future of energy, with the U.S. Secretary of Energy, the Honorable Jennifer Granholm. The Department of Energy conducts basic research at its numerous national laboratories and oversees many aspects of our nation's electrical grid. Secretary Granholm and Governors Spencer Cox of Utah, Brad Little of Idaho, David Ige of Hawaii, and Doug Burgum of North Dakota will discuss some of the challenges facing our energy sector and how states and the federal government can work together on critical energy issues.
Thank you, Jim, for that very kind introduction. And thanks to each of you for watching and for joining us in this virtual meeting. I truly appreciate the ease of being able to meet virtually, but can't wait to be back in person meeting with each of you. I especially want to thank today my fellow governors, Governors Ige, Governor Little, Burgum, and Polis, who are here with us, and a special thank you to Secretary Granholm for joining us. I think as governors, we truly appreciate interacting with cabinet members who have prior experience as governors and can appreciate the challenges and the opportunities that we face. So I'm going to start by introducing Secretary Granholm, and then we'll offer the opportunity to give some opening remarks, and we'll have plenty of time to go around the room and ask some questions and have a real conversation and dialogue. We have a lot to talk about, but we'll do our best to conclude in about 45 minutes. So again, we're very pleased to have the Secretary of Energy, Jennifer Granholm, with us. Secretary Granholm is responsible for managing one of the most demanding portfolios in the President's cabinet. She's the chief officer responsible for mapping out and implementing the nation's energy future. In addition, the Department of Energy manages the country's strategic nuclear weapons program and oversees the cleanup of the nuclear weapons complex. DOE also runs our national laboratories, which conduct more research in the physical sciences than any other federal agency. Prior to her current position, Secretary Granholm served as the governor of Michigan, the first woman elected as governor there, serving 2 terms from 2003 to 2011. She was also the first woman elected as Attorney General of Michigan and served as the state's top law enforcement officer from 1998 to 2002. Most recently, she served as Distinguished Professor of Practice in the Goldman School of Public Policy at the University of California in Berkeley and as an advisor to the Pew Charitable Trust. Madam Secretary, welcome to WGA, and we look forward to the discussion. The time is now yours.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for the welcome. And hey, all you govs, it's really great to be among you because I feel like I know a little bit about the job, and I'm really grateful to be able to be in this position now, to be able to work with you, having had that experience. So let me just share, I'll share a little bit about what DOE's been up to since I started, but let me just start by saying thank you, really. I mean, you have been leading the charge as governors toward this clean energy transition in this country. I've been watching as WGA governors have really moved the entire region forward from, Nevada, which I was visiting recently, just passed an omnibus bill that invests in transmission and electric vehicle infrastructure, to Colorado, Washington, who made their own big push in electric vehicles. Y'all are setting the example and really building the clean energy economy of tomorrow. As the states are the laboratories of democracy, the federal government can look to you and learn from you and follow as well as lead. So you are, I would say this, you're demonstrating that what is possible can be done together. I'll say that in a bipartisan way, getting things done. So we're eager to learn from you, to work with you. And because we find ourselves at a moment that really demands this strong partnership across all levels of government, we really got to torque that up. So we all know we face enormous challenges in rebuilding our economy and in addressing climate change, but in confronting crises, we can obviously seize this, what I think is a generational opportunity by, the global, first of all, let me just say this, the global market for clean energy technologies is going to skyrocket to $23 trillion at a minimum by the end of this decade, by 2030. And this administration on the federal level wants America to corner that market. And we want to see those investments in every pocket of the country. And over the past few months, DOE has been moving at really rapid speed. We've already mobilized about $1.5 billion for research and development and clean energy deployment since January. We've set this goal to cut solar costs in half yet again and reduce the cost of clean hydrogen as well by 80%. We're taking action to bolster our domestic supply chain for batteries. We are boosting the American electric vehicle and energy storage industries. We want to make sure that no community is left behind as our nation undergoes this energy and economic transformation. We launched a major initiative that identifies the 25 hardest hit and most vulnerable coal and power plant communities across the country. 11 of those are in Western states. And we've made already millions of dollars available for energy projects on carbon capture, on critical minerals, on geothermal, and more. And all of those, of course, will create jobs in these communities. So we've done a lot, but it is just a down payment on what is to come. I was asked to do this job, I think, by the president, and I took the job on the condition that this administration would do everything in its power to increase opportunity for Americans, meaning jobs in America in a global economy, good paying jobs. And there is just no bigger opportunity to increase our nation's competitiveness, to modernize our infrastructure, to corner the global clean energy market, and to create millions of good paying union jobs than the American Jobs Plan. I know you've been watching this. I know many of you have been weighing in. I know you've all heard about it, but I want to just cut right to the chase. If we can get this bill to the president's desk, it means dollars invested and jobs created in your states and in your territories. Not long ago, because I was a governor, I get that you're not just stakeholders, you're heads of government, really, and you are the laboratories, as I mentioned. And so the American Jobs Plan is ambitious, but we know it's achievable because states and territories have already implemented many of these policies. Many of you already have clean energy standards, including 100% targets, and you've shown them to be effective and popular. And that's what we want to build on. And that's why the president is prioritizing a federal clean energy standard, learning from what has happened in the states. We're eager to learn from that example and to make it easier for you to achieve your goals, which is why the American Jobs Plan includes more than $30 billion in block grants to states and tribes and territories and local governments to help you advance clean energy policies and create jobs. 30 billion. That's a huge number. And it also invests, the American Jobs Plan, in the full range of technologies that we need for a net zero economy. So the American Jobs Plan has $15 billion in it to support demonstration projects for emerging technologies like advanced nuclear, similar to the new Terra Power facility in Wyoming. And it also has funding for demonstration in carbon capture and storage, like Project Tundra in North Dakota. The plan also has a major focus on modernizing the nation's transmission grid. This group knows as well as anyone that the grid faces major climate-driven threats, from wildfires across the West to the freeze this past winter in Texas and the Southwest. As you know, it's happening now. You all know this, drought reducing hydropower generation. We just need to prepare our power system for these disasters. And that's why the American Jobs Plan would invest tens of billions of dollars to modernize the grid and make it more resilient and more secure and add capacity. So many of you are already exploring ways to increasingly interconnect the transmission systems in this region to improve affordability and resilience. And the Jobs Plan will enhance those efforts and give your residents cheaper energy bills and make the switch to electric vehicles more appealing than ever. So I'm glad to see so many of you supporting EV deployment. Let me applaud Governor Brown for leading the Western Governors Association to collaborate on expanding EV infrastructure. And here again, the American Jobs Plan would complement and boost your efforts, adding 500,000 EV charging stations nationwide, providing 50,000 electric buses to transit agencies, electrifying at least 20% of them of school buses. And not to mention the hundreds of billions of dollars that it's going to invest, obviously, in roads and bridges and rail and transit infrastructure. Put all of that together, you wind up with three things: jobs, jobs, jobs. We need workers upgrading the transmission lines. We need them assembling wind turbines. We need them building EVs and batteries, extracting and recycling critical minerals, plugging orphan oil and gas wells, and so much more. So we want those jobs to offer family-sustaining wages and excellent benefits. We want them really to increase union membership to be able to do that. We want anyone in any community to be able to participate. And just as governors have shown leadership on advancing environmental justice, we are committed to directing 40% of the benefits of the clean energy transition to disadvantaged communities. And that means former fossil communities. That means communities of color, the communities that have been left behind. So this is a once in a generation opportunity to really build a clean and prosperous economy and win the future for America. And so many of you are already doing it, often in a bipartisan way. And as you've shown, these are ideas that Democrats and Republicans can and should agree on. But sometimes this is not reflected in the discussion going on inside the Beltway, and it's why we need your help. Really, if we work together, we can make sure that this plan can get these investments flowing into your state. So I encourage you all to continue making your voices heard. I hope we can work together and let's get the job done. So thank you so much. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Well, thank you, Madam Secretary, for those comments and that report. There are some great things happening and definitely some bipartisan things happening that I know that we all support. If it's okay, I just take the moderator's prerogative to offer just some observations and ask a couple of questions just to kick this off. So I want to pull on just a couple threads that you mentioned, and we're very enthusiastic about many of the things that you've outlined. Of course, in Utah, we have both our traditional fossil fuel energy produced mostly in the eastern side of the state, as well as our leadership in exploring renewable resources. We are a leader in geothermal energy, and our Utah Forge project in Milford, Utah is cutting-edge collaboration with the Department of Energy, and we so appreciate that collaboration. I'm also very enthusiastic. You mentioned the project with our good friend, Wyoming Governor Gordon, with that Rocky Mountain Power and TerraPower would be converting one of Wyoming's retiring coal plants into a safe nuclear power plant. That's a boon for all of the western states with interconnected power grids. And we're also very interested in bringing more EV infrastructure to the west and working with you on that. Now, here's the question I have. One challenge that I see, and where I'd love your feedback and help, is the administration's seemingly conflicting goals of encouraging more renewable energy sources and also offering more restrictive land designations that complicate the process of producing and transmitting that energy. Let me be just a little more specific since you mentioned both of them. For example, producing nuclear power, creating solar panels, and other types of renewable energy require enormous amounts of critical minerals. You mentioned critical minerals. We have many of those critical minerals in the West, but the administration seems to have an impulse towards leaving much of it underground. We're currently awaiting decisions on the potential expansion of 2 large national monuments in Utah that may further restrict our ability to access those critical minerals that will otherwise be coming from China and places that are much more difficult to deal with. Now, I know that's the Department of the Interior, but obviously you work together on those. And also with transmission lines, the process of permitting for transmission lines on public lands, including to expand electric vehicle charging stations is incredibly expensive and cumbersome, embarrassingly so. I mean, it can take 10 years to get approval for a simple transmission line. And so I'm hoping you could help us kind of reconcile those goals and interests and how we can come to harmony in making those things happen.
Yeah, it's a great series of questions, really, is what is the role of government in facilitating this policy that I know the administration wants to move toward, which is getting 100% of our electricity from clean sources by 2035 and net zero carbon emissions by 2050. So the president has said that he is going to be requiring the Department of Interior to open up federal lands further for renewable exploration, deployment, et cetera. And we just last month, or just a couple of weeks ago, we said we issued a national blueprint, for example, for the lithium ion battery for electrification of the vehicles. And that blueprint insisted that we've got to do more extraction in a responsible way. And we know that we can do sustainable extraction. We know that we can help to fund sustainable extraction. And so we want to be able to do that. I know that the Department of Interior is looking at their permitting strategy and seeing how much they can, while still respecting the environment, how much they can streamline it so that things can move much more quickly, because there is a sense of urgency out there. This is true, this permitting issue obviously is true with the transmission grid as well, and that's a state and federal issue, and sometimes a local issue too. And we would love to have a conversation about how we can facilitate better siting of transmission in partnership with the governors as well. But know that this administration is committed to being independent of our economic adversaries who have had a 5-year plan, China, to corner the market on these critical minerals. We should be developing them. We should be recycling them. We should be looking from a research perspective at substitutes, but we're not going to be able to do this unless we have some of our own supply. And I would say, just sort of as a foot stomp on this, we also should be processing those minerals. It would be silly to extract them here and then send them to China for processing. We should have the whole supply chain, soup to nuts, anode, cathode, separator material, electrolyte, critical minerals, making the cells, assembling them into packs, assembling them into vehicles, and selling the vehicles. All of that is part of the national blueprint that the president has contemplated for electric vehicles.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. That's what we like to hear. We really appreciate that. Okay, now I want to open it up to our fellow governors. We've got about 20 to 25 minutes for additional questions.
I'll just jump in. Thank you, Spencer. This is Doug Burgum in North Dakota, but I want to echo what Spencer said, Secretary Granholm. We're also pleased to have someone who's been in a governor's seat at the cabinet level. And it's fantastic that you have that experience because you understand the state's perspective. Here in North Dakota, it was fun to hear you talk about a number of things that are important to us, but I'd say the top line for North Dakota is the words innovation versus regulation. And when we say innovation, you talked about the aspiration to be a global leader in sustainable, clean energy technology exports and that huge $23 trillion market. We agree that is absolutely the right aspiration. If we drive our fossil fuel industries out of business through regulation in the U.S., and those are the companies that have the best incentive to actually partner with states and the federal government on research to decarbonize their energy, they're the ones that will also be the exporters of that clean energy technology. But right now, under ESG, they're being starved of capital and they're constrained in a way where that innovation is not happening. So when we talk about the dollars that the Department of Energy and the federal government, the state of North Dakota and others that we're pouring into projects related to carbon sequestration, related to blue and green hydrogen, related to other forms of renewable energy and energy transportation, like taking hydrogen to ammonia and using existing infrastructure to transport that energy. All of that requires some R&D dollars. And with that, we think that we can achieve the goals or even exceed the goals that the nation has set. We think with regulation, that will raise the cost and lessen the chance of us achieving those goals. North Dakota, in May of this year, set a aspirational goal of being the first state to be carbon neutral by 2030. And part of how we can do that is utilizing the incredible carbon sink capabilities we have of all of our ranch land and our farmland, but also in the geologic jackpot of North Dakota, we've got an opportunity to sequester and store CO2, all the nation's CO2 for 50 years worth. But that again involves infrastructure. So when we talk about the infrastructure bills the federal government is working to pass, we hope that those federal infrastructure bills include definitions for hydrogen infrastructure, CO2 infrastructure, because right now, as you know, pipelines are protested everywhere, transmission lines are protested everywhere, and we have to have both power lines and pipelines to be able to achieve this energy transition. And Spencer mentioned that about the challenges on permitting that have to be shortened, or we won't hit the goals. But with that, again, I would just say, again, we're grateful for all the R&D dollars that you mentioned and those that are coming here. We would love to invite you to come to North Dakota to visit our Energy and Environmental Research Center at the University of North Dakota, where we're working on a number of these projects and have had federal grants for years, and would also love to visit with you about, we just announced in early June between a new company, Bakken Energy, and Mitsubishi, who I know you've heard of, that their intention to build the largest hydrogen hub in North America in North Dakota. So there's a lot of exciting things happening on the front here, and we'd love to have you join us up here.
I love it. I love everything you have said. From hydrogen to ammonia, green ammonia. I mean, the pipelines that are necessary for CO2, the jobs that go with all of that, the need to make sure that our fossil industry can decarbonize, and using that technology to provide net zero carbon emissions for dispatchable, reliable power, the ability to export those technologies. All of these things are what we have been teeing up. So just one quick example, and I'll turn it back over to you guys, but this hydrogen play is so important. Every one of my counterparts, the secretaries of energy or the ministers of energy in these other countries, are all looking for this clean hydrogen solution. And I encourage you all to take a look at it. It's not just a hydrogen fuel cell for transportation, although it does include that, but it's hydrogen as baseload power carrier. And in this case, ammonia, which already has a distribution system all across the world, can be the carrier of hydrogen. And that is really exciting because a lot of these countries are looking for this as a solution. Gov, I know that you know the big challenge for hydrogen, and this is why we just announced this hydrogen earth shot, we call it, which means that to get it's in one decade for $1 of kilogram of hydrogen, which is really kind of exciting. And we want to be able to reduce the cost of electrolyzers for green hydrogen and reduce the cost of converting it to ammonia, which is through this process called Haber-Bosch, which is very carbon intensive. So we want to switch that out, and we're doing research into that. The American Jobs Plan, as you know, has 10 hydrogen hub demonstration projects, 10. And those could be all, obviously located in smart places across the country that has the feedstock. But we are really excited about the possibility of demonstrating that we can get to net zero with, natural gas, with the fossil industry, as well as deploy renewables. Obviously, very important.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Greetings from the great state of Colorado, and thank you for spending time with some of our Western governors. I want to highlight something that Governor Cox said, and one big difference between the West and the East and even the Midwest is that the federal government owns much of our land. They own about 40% of the land in Colorado. It's even more in Utah and some other states. And I really want to put an emphasis on what he said around expediting the permitting process around renewable energy projects, specifically solar and wind, and hydro where applicable on federal land. That's a big deal for us, and identifying those areas, that's a kind of easy thing to do. We all really, frankly, know where they are, but to be able to do the permitting for transmission, for a solar farm, for a wind project, and expedite the NEPA process or be able to go around the NEPA process, anything like that would be critical. And it's obviously in the interest of the environment. I mean, a lot of these policies are nominally established to protect the environment, and that might apply if it's oil and gas or development. But in the case of renewable energy, the imperative of combating global warming is so existential that I hope that we can find common ground around a way of expediting solar, wind, and transmission projects that are related to renewable energy on federal land. Because again, for us, it's 40% of our state. For many other states, it's even higher. And so I would elevate that as a concern of the West. I also wanted to pivot to electric vehicles, and we're thrilled to have a partner in the White House. States like Colorado, California, others have had really tough meetings with manufacturers for years and automobile dealers and manufacturers. And I think that you at the federal level have such an enhanced ability to bring them together and to make this revolution happen. I mean, we're poised at the beginning of a revolution. 6% of the vehicles sold in Colorado were electric in the last quarter. This is fast approaching the tipping point. That's a good thing, good for consumers, for savings, for energy independence, for air quality. But I know that with your involvement in work, it can happen sooner rather than later. And so I really wanted to ask about your role in convening the manufacturers, the dealers, and how the Department of Energy and the Biden administration can really make sure that this rapidly approaching EV revolution comes sooner and in a way that benefits consumers across our country.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm completely with you on the urgency of this. As you probably are aware, this is a whole of government strategy with respect to EVs. So DOE's lane has been the technology. So we have an advanced technology office for vehicles. We also have the DOE loan program, which has an advanced vehicle technology component of it as well. That is multi-billion-dollar opportunity for those who want to take their technology to scale. So we're doing a lot of research, obviously. We're doing a lot of loan processing. The issue with respect to making sure that the vehicle that we charge, that's a joint relationship between us and the Department of Transportation. So Secretary Buttigieg and our team have been mapping out where charging stations should go, particularly when you think about the West and the long distances between some places and how important they are. And so the thought is to see where we can get synergies, not just with charging of vehicles, but with transmission siting as well along federal rights of way and on federal lands. And so all of that is happening. And I completely agree with you on the speed issue for renewables. This should not be that big of a deal. As you no doubt heard, there was a push by the Biden administration to do, just one example, 30 gigawatts of offshore wind off the Atlantic. And another entity that's under the Department of Interior, BOEM, has reinvigorated staff and has hired up and are really expediting the permitting strategy for that offshore wind opportunity. And we want to do the same thing for onshore as well. Deb Haaland, Secretary Haaland, she is really committed to this also. And so I think you're going to see more announcements to come on the expedited permitting of renewables.
Thanks. That's great to hear, Secretary. Aloha all the way from Hawaii, and certainly we would love for you to come out here. As you may be aware, Hawaii became the first state in the country in 2015, so that's 6 years ago now, to commit to 100% clean renewable energy for electricity. And we are well on our way. In 2016, we became the first state to pass a law committing to the goals of the Paris Climate Agreement. And 5 years later, we are ahead of schedule. We exceeded our 2020 goals of 20% from clean renewable energy. For Hawaii, it was part of transforming our energy, was part of transforming our economy because we were the most fossil fuel dependent state in the country, with more than 95% of our energy coming from imported fossil fuel, which meant that every year we shipped $4 or $5 billion out of state and created jobs elsewhere. And we definitely want the opportunity to bring it back here to the state of Hawaii. Right now, we have 400 megawatts of solar energy going in. That's about 25% of our energy, peak energy requirements here on the island of Oahu. And we became the first state to commit to net carbon zero by 2045. We are committed, and we believe that we can be the first net negative, be a tremendous carbon sink because of our beautiful natural environments and our commitment to carbon capture and to a full resilient economy and community. So I really do appreciate the partnership. As you know, we are isolated and we have to be self-reliant here, 2,500 miles in the middle of the Pacific. But just wondering about, as you are aware, the Indo-Pacific Command is here in Hawaii as well. And our energy system is also the nation's energy system, as reliability of the commands here are an important part of reliability for energy here in the islands. I appreciate the Energy Department's joint projects in the past, working on hydrogen and smart grids, especially in connection with the military commands here. We do believe that it's a very important part of making a more resilient community and more resilient Department of Defense here in the islands. So just wondering, I know you've talked about, and the president has talked about, an all of government response to the climate crisis. Certainly we are interested in what kind of joint projects we can do with the Department of Defense here to really accelerate energy self-reliance. There are a lot of different issues that impact us. Net carbon neutral air travel, certainly something that is important to the Air Force here, but just wondering what your thoughts are. And then shipping, is there a way for electrification of air travel and shipping that the department might be considering moving forward?
Thank you for that, Governor Ige. I'm really grateful to Hawaii for leading this. Long before I was Energy Secretary, a few years before Governor Ige became Governor Ige, DOE was working with Hawaii to establish that clean energy initiative. 100% is just such a big number, and you guys are well ahead. Just as one thought for everybody, or just a piece of information, if you're interested, we do a lot of work to support state and local governments pursuing their own energy priorities. So we just help, meaning we, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, just helped the city of LA with some very sophisticated analyses of their grid to chart a realistic power system to get to 100% renewable by 2030, which they have announced. We are very interested in the hard to decarbonize sectors. So you talk about air and I would say large transport as well, including marine. Our bioenergy technology office is really interested in expanding the opportunity for air and marine travel to be used with low carbon biofuels, as well as looking at larger scale electrification. That's a little bit harder with obviously these very big systems. So we think biofuels is probably more likely, at least teed up first, which is an opportunity, I would say, as well across the country for the agricultural sector to be able to convert maybe existing biorefineries to be able to do aviation fuels as we move toward more electrified transportation for passenger and some commercial vehicles as well. So we're really interested in all of that. And I hadn't thought about how Hawaii really is partnering with the defense industry. Of course, that makes perfect sense. And to have those sites, which I know that DoD is really interested in using its footprint, its base footprint across the country to be able to demonstrate clean energy generation and a low carbon footprint. So thanks for putting that into my mind in terms of talking with the Defense Secretary of the Department of Defense as well. But we want to continue partnering with you on making sure that Hawaii continues to lead.
Thank you.
Madam Secretary, this is Brad Little in Idaho. We look forward to having you visit our lab. I know you've got 17 of them. We're kind of partial to the one we have here. And Spencer talked about the new modular reactor that's is intended to be sited in Wyoming. A lot of that research has taken place at your lab here, but probably one of the other critical things they do is cybersecurity for small utilities, large utilities, states, the whole grid. And in fact, in Idaho, we bonded and paid for the new supercomputer center in the cyber core building, where a lot of that cutting edge research is going on, to where we literally train utility operators from all over the United States in how to harden their defenses for cyber. I want to just echo what both Spencer and Doug said about we got a lot of federal land in Idaho, and not only permitting for transmission, but also in some instances the most efficient place to put a site is on federal land. I know that's a heavy lift, and if we just had the siting or the transmission addressed, that would be helpful. But that's, and of course, I also agree on the strategic minerals. We're ramping up the first domestic cobalt mine in the United States right now, and it's having some NEPA issues, not too many, but we as Spencer, we have a lot of strategic minerals that would be available in Idaho. So anything the Department of Energy can do to nudge your partners in either the Department of Agriculture or Department of Interior to get that done would be very helpful. And we look forward to having you come to the lab and new. And the other thing the lab does a lot of is the research on what we do with the spent fuel, our legacy spent fuel, but more importantly, as if we ramp up SMRs or whatever it is, what do we do to get all the energy we can out of those compounds and then safely store them and find a long-term home for that product going forward. Those are all things we're doing at the lab. So thank you, Madam Secretary.
You bet. I look forward to coming to see the lab as well and to see you there, hopefully. I will say that, on the waste issue, just quickly, because I know we're probably at the end of our time, but at the end of 2012, there was a Blue Ribbon Commission that was studied what to do about spent nuclear fuel and waste. And as we know, the Yucca Mountain site, this administration has said that's not where it's going to go, but we're beginning a consent-based siting process where we will put out an inquiry to states. And this is for all of you who have large amounts of land. It's worthy of your maybe consideration, because obviously states will be compensated if they decide to raise their hand and say, I'm not interested in having a conversation about that. We want to make sure that whatever happens is done in partnership with states and communities and not to them. So that process, keep your eye open for that process to start. Let me just say one other thing about federal lands and permitting and mining, et cetera. I know that we can do this with respect for the indigenous populations, for our tribes. I know we can do this in a way that uses technology to have minimal impact. I know that, we consider DOE to be the solutions department. I know that we can craft a process which has buy-in, whether it's for storage of waste or for doing any of these other activities. So I am confident that if we work together on this and really work with urgency and alacrity, I think it will prove to be beneficial for our people and the planet. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on, fellow Govs. And once a Gov, always a Gov. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to working with you all.
Well, Madam Secretary, thank you again for taking time to be with us to discuss the issues that are impacting the West. Often we feel like there's a little bit of an East Coast bias, and so it's really helpful when we have these opportunities to connect with you and with other members of the cabinet. It means so much to us. Thank you. I know our time is up. I want to thank again my fellow governors for joining us for this session. And with that, Jim, we'll turn it back over to you.